Spiritism tells us? Many people have been raised under this statement that it's okay for the fathers to be absent. It's okay for the fathers not to be truly engaged. Well, science, psychological sciences, have already proved to us that the fathers matter, that they have an important role. And more recently, we've got to know through the studies of Bert Hellinger in Germany with the family constellation, that the mother represents life and the father represents the world. If we are not deeply in sync with our father and mother in this life, we may have problems in the basis, the foundation, the roots of our lives. So acknowledging the father means, and respecting, honoring, means that we'll be good to deal with the world. How so? In Spiritism, we have few messages about Joseph the Father. And for those who are watching us, or who are here, we often talk about Winter Joseph. That's not the Joseph we're talking about today, okay? Joseph the Father is another Joseph, okay? So Joseph, the father of Jesus, who was he? Emmanuel, through Chico Xavier, wrote a few things about him. And there is one specific message that is not very much known by even by the movement, in a book that is not yet translated, that talks about Joseph of Galilee. And we're going to pinpoint a few things. Joseph from Galilee. So let us go straight to the very region. So we're talking about this area here, okay? This is pretty much Nazareth is within it. Capernaum, Bethsaida. So we're talking about all those cities that are mentioned in the trajectory of the first Christians as well as Jesus the Master. Joseph came from Galilee, okay? The father of Jesus. But who was he? What do we know? We know he was the son of Jacob, not the first Jacob of the Judaic tree, but Jacob that is descendant from the Jacob. Okay? So he's the son of Jacob and descendant of David. Does that matter? Yes, it does. Because we're talking about, in the Bible, there's the description confirmed by the good spirits that there was a group of families that were incarnating and reincarnating with the purpose of preparing the pathway for the incarnation of the Christ of the earth. It's not by chance. What does that mean? It means, that doesn't mean that the blood ties matter. What it means is the plan of the higher spirits. None of us here reincarnate without a plan. Even if I have a one-night stand and get pregnant, and people are like, oh my gosh, what happened? That's a mistake. According to Spiritism, it's not. How do we break it down? Well, you were probably unaware of the arrangements. And the way it happened had your pixie dust of free will. Yes, that happens. But it's a mixture. Life is very complex. It's an equation. Our freedom plus the will of God. How does it happen? Only God knows. Huh? I don't know. We know it's in the equation. Our free will plus God's will equals to everything that happens in our lives. So the mix of it all. So when somebody gets pregnant, whether they planned it or not, on the behind behind the scenes, there is a plan. If you want to read about it, go read Action and Reaction. This is a book that talks about a girl, one of the chapters, several chapters, but one chapter talks about a girl that's like, just living la vida loca, literally, living life. And then she gets pregnant, and she's like, oh my gosh, that doesn't make any sense to me. And she's pushing that life away with her mind. But then Andrea Luiz, the spirit doctor, shows to us that there is a reason why she's connected to that spirit. That if she would have accepted that pregnancy, her life was supposed to change dramatically. Instead, she pushes that life out of herself. Well, the story is beyond it. It's for another day. But for us, we know that there is a reason why we reincarnate in this family and in that family. And when they plan the coming of the ultimate authority of the earth to the planet Earth, the governor of the planet, Jesus Christ, they had planned it out for centuries before he actually did it. Of course, if our president decides to go to a summit with the North Korean leader, we talk about it years, months in advance. There are preparations after preparations. Just for the president, imagine for the governor of the planet. So of course, there were arrangements making sure that the family lineage would sustain the powerhouse of that mind. Physically, the gene pool needed to have a minimum quality, let's say, to sustain that pure mind that was coming to the earth. To show to us the way. Because he's not only a guide, but a model. It's easy to stay from above the clouds and say, go to the right, go to the left. But when we love, we jump in waters. Face any danger to rescue our loved ones. And Jesus came into the sea of this world. He really swam in the same waters as we have been swimming. And he showed how to swim. Not to dive safely, to help others who may be in trouble, and including ourselves. So of course, the family lineage had to go on for both realms of evolution to make sure that physically, that physical body would sustain that life that would come. And also, philosophically, religiously, we needed a foundation. And that's why the Hebrews were the chosen one. We needed people that were already fundamentally understood that there was one God. It was the foundation. So Emmanuel confirms it to all of us. And he says something in this message. Joseph of Galilee was a deeply spiritual man. He talks about it in this book, Levantar e Seguir, not yet in English, but it will be published in the upcoming issue of the Spiritist magazine, so people have the whole chapter to study. And he says to us, in general, when we refer to the masculine, I'm sorry, this one is not translated yet. To the masculine personalities that came to the earth connected to the mission of Jesus, we always think about those who failed. And he talks about the disciples who denied, who ran away, etc. But we forget, and he says so beautifully, that there was one man connected directly with Jesus that really fulfilled his mission without any flaw. Who is this Joseph? Because he must be a model for us too. Everything in Jesus' life is a model, an inspiration. And what an inspiration for us. So he says, he was a deeply spiritual man. I didn't know of it. Did you know it? We didn't. But why didn't we know? What is the catch here? I mean, why they sent a father in a very patriarchal society that didn't play like the rest of them? He was not above his son. He was not a show-off. He was not like bragging about himself. What happened? Who is this Joseph? Does he matter? What is the secret to his divine mission? So, here we have it. In the book Mechanisms of Mediumship, we get to know through André Luiz that to welcome Jesus' mental influx, the gospel gives us news of a small congregation of mediums ready to welcome Jesus. Who were they? Relatives, Isabel and Zachariah, Anna, Simeon, Mary the mother, and Joseph the father. Joseph was a medium. He received the communication from the angel. And that's because he was a medium too. Jesus was the medium of God on earth, of nobody else. Kardec says in the book Genesis. And to be a medium, you need to come from a family where there are mediums too. Kardec talks about it in the medium's book. Mediumship is organic. It's in the genes. You need, and Kardec talks even more. He says, in the constitution of the perispirit, those who are mediums have a different perispiritual constitution. Their spiritual body needs to have a different physiology and even anatomy, and he talks about one layer of protection, not that is missing, that is transformed to allow the communication into realms. So for somebody to be of that stature, medium of God, the family was also a medium. Says André Luiz in a beautiful chapter in this book that is coming about in English, Mecanismos da Mediunidade. Just one step back. When he says about Jesus' mental influx, it's about a computer and the possibility of processing a specific software. The physical body, the brain, needs to have an opportunity to process that amount of information. So, if I have a computer that is powerful enough to process, and I say powerful in terms of processing capacity, in terms of memory, a particular software, I'll be able to install it and use it in that computer. The same for the physical body at human level. There are certain softwares that the physical body of a human being can process, but not at the animal level. So when we talk about reincarnation, there is no possibility of anyone reincarnating as human and then as an animal. It would burn the system. Because even neuroscience would tell that the potency we have in our brain, we cannot regress and process that much of potency of the spirit in the physical. Of course, science doesn't tell that part of the story, but we in Spiritism, we add that up. And that's understandable. So we Spiritists work hand in hand with science. For us, Darwin was right. We evolve. Physically, and that makes sense. Because we evolve spiritually. So So Spiritism has no clash with science. And that doesn't mean that God hasn't created us. So we combine both views. God created us, but God created us to progress. What would be the point of creating us already done? A lot of work. If it's a lot of work to have a baby and we don't need to manufacture the baby with our hands, imagine if you had to build it from scratch. For what? Just to, oh, wow, so beautiful. But God has a plan. We're discovering the plan. We're discovering us in God's plans. But it must be a beautiful plan. Because the more we study about life and nature, we fall in love with God. And there are many people who haven't fell in love with God because they don't contemplate nature. Too much iPhone, too much tablet, too much busy lives. Stop everything. Sit outside in your backyard. Look at nature. Do some bird watching. Why not? Now it's perfect time to do bird watching, right? Look at the animals playing nature, like the squirrels. The deers nature is in feast now because that's the time for them to come out of their caves and mate and reproduce and the plants, all the kingdoms are rejoicing in celebration of life because it's spring, summer. So it's time for us also to get out and feel the greatness of it all and feel we're connected to it. What for? And it's our own discovery. Nobody's going to be able to tell us if we don't feel it. So we are part of a bigger plan, like Jesus. He was part of a teamwork effort. Some people think of Jesus as if he was self-sufficient, but he never played self-sufficiency. He always said, I came because my Father sent me. Humility. And he had parents to bring him into this life. That's humility, because a superhero, if you watch the superhero movies, usually the parents really matter very little. It's like they came out of nowhere. And at some point, the parents doesn't really matter. In this superhero story, the real one, the parents matter a lot. Because they are part of the superhero performance. It's a teamwork effort. So who was this Joseph? Because Mary, we kind of feel her more easily. But what about Joseph? What was his role? Some people think he was just there as a tree. We love the trees. They give us life too, oxygen. But is that it? So Emmanuel says to us that he was an integral man who attended to Jesus. And let me read a little more here. He says this way. He was a man, Joseph of Galilee, was such a deeply spiritual man that his sublime personality skips the analysis of humanity on earth. But he asks, have you thought of Christianity without Joseph the founder? When people talk excessively about creatures, humans who fail, let us remember that there was a time in which Mary and the Christ were entrusted by the divine forces to one man. We never realized it. And he says to us, although honored by the exhortation of an angel, Joseph never was never proud of such high incumbency of God, which is so different. If an angel comes to you today, probably, I'm not saying you, let's say me, I would probably take Facebook tomorrow or YouTube and say to the world, then now I hear the voices of the angels, and then, you know, that's what many people do. But Vanessa, Joseph didn't have Facebook at the time, or YouTube. Well, but there were other ways of, you know, telling the world. We've never heard that Joseph was like, you know, trumpeting to the world.
You started this conversation and you asked about, you know, the first thing I thought of was humble. Humble.
Yeah, he never bragged about himself. So different for our current society. Because we're used to, in this world, the higher you get, the more connections you get, the more you inflate about ourselves. Joseph was not like that. He heard it. Did he doubt? Did he wrestle with the angel saying, oh, I'm not so sure? Because Zechariah, when the angel came to talk about the incarnation of John the Baptist, in the neighboring family, relatives of Jesus, the cousin, John the Baptist, through Isabel. We know. He was like, I'm not so sure. He became blind temporarily. And was only later that he recovered, when he really understood that the angels were not playing games. But Joseph was easy. Therapeutic question for all of us. Are we easy or that easy? When our guardian angels tell us to do something in our daily lives? Or do we resist? They tell us, stop these addictions. But just one more day. Just one more, and then I'll stop. Stop this behavior. We don't. Love more, like, and we confiscate love. We withhold. We keep love hostage, and that's why we get sick. Diabetes is spread out. We don't put sweetness in life. We don't multiply. Then we lack. The body feels it, speaks for us. Let sweetness be in life. Jesus said, joy of living. Why shouldn't we be joyful? You were created without noticing, because God thought, boom, we were created. God sustains our lives, here we are. We reincarnate, new life, new program, new opportunities. Super happy. Also because this life shall pass. Woo, wonderful. It's great, but you know, there are limitations to this greatness. So you know, the difficulties, the challenges shall pass. I can already see myself, whoa, can you imagine in 1,000,000 years? Seriously. In 1,000,000 years, not this body. Maybe not on earth. I don't know. Where else in the universe? The universe is ours. As far as we know, the universe is ours. Those who grasp that feeling, they live a completely different life. They work in a different way. They love without restrictions. They don't need to do anything but just to love, just to feel the joy of living. And keep on doing what God wants. Joseph heard, you will be helping in the coming of the one that was sent by God to help everyone on the earth. It was a convocation. was a soldier that was being recruited. And he said, yes, sir. Count on me. His obedience. And at the same level, we're going to see faithfulness to God. And this is the first lesson from Joseph to us. Parents, stay faithful to God. Regard your children. How sacred our children are. Even the ones that are temporarily troubled. Yesterday we had the second online Spiritist forum with youth, adorable teens. And one of them was saying that they needed to be more appreciated by the adults. Because, and this is where we replicate with the teens what we have received from our generations. We were probably not respected, so we don't pass it on. We undermine their greatness. Kardec then asked the spirits, children, are they more evolved than adults? And the spirits answered, that is often the case. It must be, because we're progressing. The new generations must be better than us. But when we have our children, do we have that sense of sacredness before them? Often, no. We project ourselves. Usually parents look at their children as ways to fulfill their egotistic nature. When they're little, they're the cutest because I can control them. I can do with them what I want. When they start speaking, and that's the 3-4-year-olds who are showing a little personality, and that's where parents are clashing with their children. And there's a terrible 2s, terrible 3s, terrible 4s, because who are these that think differently? Behave differently. There was a time on earth, sociology shows, that people used to think that children were worse than animals. Because animals were more useful. Dogs could guard the house. Cats entertained the owners. Horses, cows, working animals, children. That's not that they are, but many thought that way. It's like a waste of time, just creating problems. We want to do something, they don't want to do that, and still we behave this way. Why? Because we don't want to listen. And there was a time that Jesus is a child, and we know this information thanks to Spiritism, through Chico Xavier the medium. Humberto de Campos, the spirit, came through Chico Xavier and wrote the Book of News. In the 2nd chapter, he tells us little bits of the childhood of this spirit that came from the highest spheres to us. And talking a little bit about Mary as a mother, as any mother who is diligent, concerned. And she would often find him as a child, talking to the travelers, to the passers-by, and offering them food as a child. Though she appreciated, she was like, that's a little concerning. Because it was not average. And I know parents who see children who go to school and care about their classmates, or who do not beat the friends who beat them. And they come, and I've heard parents say, but Vanessa, They need to learn how to defend themselves. Okay. So the angels tell you, you received somebody who is ahead of the game, but you don't want them to play ahead of the game. Are we faithful to God? No. Then we're the first ones who are creating an adolescence that is not comfortable. And then they become teens in our standards. And it's off. And we think it's their problem. But the teens are byproduct of the parents, whether we like it or not. It's unfailing. Good parenting will lead to good teenage years. I've met good parents. They're not genius. We're not saying they're geniuses. They're just good parents who were faithful, who trusted the good nature of the child, who never put them down, because bullying begins in our homes. When parents are sarcastic, when children speak up and they give that look, that is a stronger message than saying anything to the child. That's not being faithful to God. In Joseph's modeling as a father, Emmanuel shows to us that he was first and foremost faithful to God. Then, despite, says Emmanuel, despite contemplating the effect that Jesus had on the Hebrew doctors, Joseph never abandoned his carpentry. And that's huge. So let's go back to what happened at this moment. Remember when Jesus was a preteen? He was like around 12. They were visiting the Jewish temple. And then they found Jesus talking to the highest of the temple, the doctors of the law. Imagine at 12, talking same level. They were mesmerized. They called Joseph, not Mary. Mary was paying attention. She wanted to take action. Joseph heard the invitation. Bring your child here so he can be a doctor of the law. They went home. Joseph didn't say anything. All we know is that Mary was taking the lead. She was like, oh, that's a good plan. Because then he settled. That doesn't mean only religious life. It means professional life. It means social status. It means like he was set for life. And Joseph and the family would change their status too. Everything would change. So it was a plus for the whole family. From being a Galilean to becoming, one of the few. And what happened? Was Joseph impressed? As far as we know, he kept working on his carpentry on the very day when they came back to their home. But Mary was there, says Humberto de Campos. I need to talk to Jesus. I need to talk to him. When she called him, he said, Mom, what is happening? Why are you unsettled? When she mentioned her feelings, the plan, he turned and said, Mom, I am choosing the best school. He turned, went back to his father, kept working with his father. His father was the one that received the invitation. He spoke his decision to be faithful to God, working in the simplicity of his life, and not stressing his son out like many parents are doing nowadays. It's swimming classes, and baseball classes, and piano classes, and violin classes, plus 10,000 homeworks in the school, and then these kids we're seeing day in, day out, kids who have anxiety, depression, stress. No, because they have to be ahead. It's a competition, everybody, there's no other way. And then you're treating these kids for 10,000 things that never happened before. Due to pride, egotistic nature of the parents. If they don't go to X Ivy League school, they are not good enough. And then we see in the news, people who do, oh, they're the greatest. Okay. That's what many people thought at Jesus' time, that to be the greatest was to go to that pathway. But Joseph heard the angel and kept himself humble, kept himself in the sublime virtue of simplicity. So another lesson from Joseph: parents, stay humble and simple. In our psychosomatic disorders, in our children who easily disappear, parents contact us through the Spiritist support for parents, the website, and other mechanisms. And some say, but Vanessa, my child is little, goes to school and cries, gets sick all the time. What do you think is happening there? I think your child is saying it's not a good environment. But what do I do? Well, do what I did. Take that child out of school. That school's not good. Go shop for another. But there's no better school. Well, then build one. How is the world going to change if we accept this out of school? Oh, but Vanessa, then, but that's the point. We need to change it because the way it is not working. I'm not saying that teachers are to be blamed for it because they are parents too. It's in the parenting that we need to change. I've seen teachers and directors of schools in this country telling me that preschool children, it's okay for them to experience in school some form of bullying because they need to prepare for the teen years. As a psychologist and as a neuroscientist, I say you probably should be taking your license out of your hands. Because at this level, the bullying that is inflicted on them is long-lasting in its effects. Another thing is for a teen to experience bullying, but not at 4, 5, 6, 7 years of age. So the teachers are wrong. And yesterday, when we gave the microphone to some teens, they mentioned about bullying, and they said, and I asked, what do you want the world to do? And they said, the teachers should be taking action, and they don't. And I agree. And they don't. We think it's okay because many experience the same, and they think it's okay. Like in countries in our world where we have certain forms of, how do you call it? Just escaped my mind. The genital for women. Mutilation, thank you. All the documentaries show that there is no need to do that. But they ask the elderly women who do the procedure of genital mutilation in girls. They say, it happened to us, it's a ritual, it's a sin, it has to be repeated. You're hurt, and the world needs to be hurt, because otherwise, where do you fit in? So bullying has to stop. Where does it stop? It stops in our homes. So stay humble and simple. Humble and simple. Then Emmanuel says that Joseph gave all he could to Jesus. Everything. He taught him the preciousness of work, of integrity. family life of harmony. Sometimes we aim so high, then we go to people's home, it's a mess. Some people say, Vanessa, I want to change my life. Change changeably from what you can see. Go to your house and say, if you had to sell this house today, it's amazing because when we're preparing to sell a house, it becomes so beautiful. So pretend you're selling your house and organize it as if you were selling it. Make it functional. Donate everything. You don't need it because think, today we may discarnate. If this book is mine, it no longer will be mine. So why keep it if you don't use it? Give it to somebody else who needs it. Because one day it won't be with us. We better change hands now than later. Says Humberto de Campos in a message that is titled Preparation for Death. We need to do it today because that day is going to happen. Ben Franklin said, death and taxes are a sure thing. So, Joana de Angelis comes and says, think about death every day. Not in a morbid way. But one day we won't be here. Are you ready? Have you already prepared everything? Will we give headaches to people? I often come to know of people who discarnated and the trouble they left to their loved ones. Secrets and mysteries that people didn't know that they existed. And then, but people get to know, rest assured. Because when we discarnate, it's like nature. An animal dies, it doesn't announce it's natural. The vultures come. When we discarnate, everybody receives the announcement and they come. So the love affairs are going to show up and then we'll be in trouble. Because our family will know that we were not all that we claimed we were. And people tell, when they become emotional through death, they start speaking. And they don't care if you feel more. They're going to say, oh, but you know, he was so loving to me. To our family, no, but he built a family with me, but with me too. And they don't care if you suffer more or less. They tell. And that's when trouble begins. And not talking about the dispute for inheritance. And you know, unfortunately, inheritance doesn't mean really a lot of money. Maybe a chair. But that chair was Dad's chair. I want that chair. No, but it's my chair. It is preferred, and people fight about it if they knew the consequences for that soul. So these are real things that we need to talk about. Joseph gave all he could of himself above anything else. And he attended to his daily obligations. There are many parents who spend more than they should, thinking that to give our children happiness is to take them to the Six Flags every weekend. Take them to the mall, buy things, and give them a lot of sweets. And grandparents, by the way, grandparents, they really cross the line. And then they give a lot of sugar. And nowadays we know it's not really good to give them a lot of sugar that way. Before, it was okay for the grandmas to bake all those cakes because we would run in the backyard, in the streets. But nowadays, they eat the cake and they sit down. It's not going to work. So that cake is no longer love. It's trouble. So we need to love in a different way. Maybe make the cake and walk take them to nature. That's what medicine says. Eat something, walk for 15 minutes to help your body. Deal, right, Leticia? Don't sit or sleep, because if you ate, it's to be used, it's fuel. You don't fill up the tank and park your car for 100 days. You use it. Eat, fuel. So today after our meal, go back, leave the cars here. Go and walk home. Because we have enough calories to go home, rest, and come back to pick up the car. Okay? So, but attend to our daily obligations. Confession here. As a mother, Virginia growing up, being at home, I was like, oh, I need to entertain her. What do? I started creating lesson plans, activities. And then one day Joseph said, Vanessa, mentor Joseph, not the Joseph father of Jesus. He said, Vanessa, Virginia was not born for a walk in the park. She was born to progress, to learn. Practical skills. So go do the laundry. So she sees that that is life. Vacuum the floor, so she sees that that is the fun of life as well. Do the dishes. Let her see the father cooking, because that's life. We want to give everything ready for our children, as if they are daily guests of our home. But what can we give them? The practical skills of life. Joseph was master on it. He would wake up, go to his work, take the child, teach it. I cannot even imagine the peacefulness of them, the harmony. Because carpentry is a lot of work. You have to be mindful, to be fully present. We've never heard he got injured or Jesus got injured, because if they did big time, we would have known. They were probably very mindful, very careful. So this quietude in fulfilling our daily obligations is a good antidote to anxiety. Some people, I'm too anxious, start cleaning the house. But I've cleaned, no, there's always another level of cleaning. Organizing. And I'm not saying obsessively, but put your body, your mind where the body is. Go work out. Go eat with consciousness that you're breathing and eating. Work with diligence. Sit at a computer. Most people work with a computer in front of them. Not all, but many. Sit in front of the computer and say, thank God I can type it. Oh, wow, that's so interesting. I'm thinking and my hands are moving. Because some people, they think the hands don't move. What a blessing. Oh, I can stand up and walk. I can lay down if I want. Some people, they have problems. They cannot lay down to sleep. They have issues. They can eat. Some people have so many gastric intestinal problems, they cannot eat. Some people cannot even drink water, any water. It has to be a specific type of water, because I don't know why other types of water don't work. So we are enjoying the simplicity of the most complex things that became automated. Joseph was a master of this. A master. And he gave us another lesson as parents. Provide your best always in the simplicity of everyday life. Fulfilling obligations. I have to say this. I had a grandfather, his name was Saint Anthony, but in Portuguese, Santo Antônio. Because his mother made a promise. You were born. He was given the name, Saint Anthony. We called him Santinho. He was adorable as a Spiritist, very close to us. He lived until 92 years of age, pretty healthy. But he was this, thinking of Joseph, I can recall my grandfather. He said, my grandfather was this. Imagine Joseph the father. He would wake up very peacefully and take his breakfast, very frugal, nothing much, together with my grandma. Go to the store that they had every day open. Little city, little town. People would come, talk. At noon, he didn't have a boss. He would close the store, go back to the house. And my grandma would have everything set up as well. So both was almost like a movie. Never saw them arguing. Never saw them stressing out, talking bad about anyone. Anybody who would stop at the door, they would talk and help because of the Spiritist Center in the city. They were leaving. He would go back after, I think at 1:30, he would open again the store. Stay there until 6. Come back. But he would, before that, say to my grandma, go back into the store, I'm going to buy the bread for the afternoon coffee break, which was just next block, go to the bakery. Every day, like clockwork. Clockwork. Never saw. Sometimes they had the 5 of us for vacation in their house to give a break to my parents. Never saw them screaming at us. I have 4 brothers, by the way. The boys are always the troublemakers, not the girls. No, but seriously, it's a lot of kids. And clockwork. We never saw them, oh my gosh, it's late for lunch. Well, it's like noon, 1:30. Would go to the Spiritist Center, and we would see him, my grandma, and he would carry the umbrella just in case if it rained, because they would walk to the Spiritist Center. He was the treasurer of the center. And I would see him coming back, opening the book, and writing down what was sold, the membership fees that were paid, like sacred. Seeing that, he never taught anything by words to me. When I go back, rewind the tape, I can only imagine this multiplied by 100, Joseph the father. Waking up, fulfilling the duties, and going back, teaching by example. So, finalizing, says Emmanuel that Joseph passed in the world in the divine silence of God. One of the virtues that is probably the least appreciated, especially in America. We love to speak, and that's beautiful, because Americans are eloquent. Oh yes, very assertive. But there is one virtue that is yet to be appreciated in our world. This divine silence. Joseph, representing this feature of God, brings to us the invitation to learn to appreciate silence. But silence is tricky. When we study psychoanalysis, there is a line by Dr. Lacan that teaches us that silence may mean many things. Many things. So let's just take one more step before we wrap up to think about the different meanings of it. Science reveals to us that silence may be not the same at all times. Sometimes if people do something that is wrong, and we are present and we don't take any action, it means we are vouching for it. No, but I don't want to get involved, but were already involved. It was done in front of you. There are times people want to fight, and we stay quiet. It's a way to say, I don't want to go to that direction. So there's a message. There is a message, and we need to understand the message. We want to give to people, and the message people are giving to us. It's what we call social emotional intelligence. We need to be fully aware of how we are using silence in our daily lives. Joseph was the master of it. Of course, not above Jesus the master, but in alignment with the proposal. As Emmanuel says, he represents the divine silence. Silence is a form of communication. So today with Joseph the father, we are learning that above all, we need to appreciate also a little more of silence. But what kind of silence? So let us talk about it here. What kind of silence do we want to cherish, cultivate in our life? If we could give quality to it, what kind of silence? What message in silence we wanna send through silence? Examples? Anybody would like to share? A silence that means prayer. A silence that may mean tranquility. Silence that may mean peace, concord, respect, appreciation. Yes.
I remember one time that you said sometimes the person is quiet, but the mind
Is going crazy.
yeah, they don't say it, but you know, so it's worse, right?
It's worse. So that's important to bring about. Sometimes we keep our mouths quiet, but the mind is a volcano. Recently in the children's activities, there was a book. My mouth is a volcano, but the mind may be a volcano. And then the connections we make, Mamma Mia, we don't want to be close. Because for any thought and feeling, there's a connection. A prayer is only a good connection if we are praying with surrender, not demanding. Some people think their prayer is like, oh God, come on, stop it. Don't you see I'm suffering? But that's not exactly a prayer, right? But God, you know I'm suffering. And you know I need to get new tools to overcome this suffering. Please show me. I know you do, but please make me see the resources you gave me, and I'm not seeing it to overcome these problems sooner than later. In me. So it's a surrender. I understand you're the greatest. I understand you're providing. I'm still not seeing. Keep teaching. Keep showing. Like a good student comes to the teacher. Teacher, I still didn't get this. Oh, we want to kiss that student saying, good job, you came to me. Because some, they feel the trouble. They don't want to talk. You know, one day, when I became a teacher at a university in Brazil, by chance, in my first year, I got to know my mom was going to be my student. My mom, yeah. She wanted to, I graduated in psychology, she wanted to do the same path. And I used to teach statistics to psychology, believe it or not. It was another life. And I remember every student used to ask me questions, but my mom. One day I asked her, Mom, what happened? when you did the course, you never asked me any question. But I said, you're not my teacher. Do you need any help, Mom? She said, no. I'm going to do exactly as you did. I'm going to apply myself and make it. And she was a 10 student in my course. And she was already above 60 at the time. After a big gap, like 20 years of being out of school. But sometimes we don't ask the teacher because we're afraid. He wasn't her case. But sometimes we don't ask God because we doubt that God is loving enough to understand us, to give us another chance. The one proof we have that God loves us irrespective of our crimes is that we keep on existing, whether incarnated or discarnated. But I don't deserve, but God thinks you do because you're still existing. Not only living on earth, but you're existing. So, recompose yourself like Paul of Tarsus, build a new path. Right? So Joseph came to teach us this divine silence that we don't know. Oh, Washington, D.C., listen to this message. Send it to the corners of the Washington, D.C., especially the White House, so we learn to be a little quiet and be more peaceful. Oh, yes, that's a message as citizens. We want a government that is more peaceful. And that's not a political statement. It's a spiritist statement. As Kardec said, we're here also to transform our society. And we have the right and the duty to step forward and request a different attitude. And Joseph comes on this very June in Washington, D.C. to teach us how we can find in our daily lives, include a little more of this divine silence that brings harmony, that brings this faithfulness to God, this willingness to build new tranquility, synchronicity with God. Knowing that everybody's equal to us in rights, in life. Though we may be different, we are given the same rights. It's in the Declaration of Independence of this country. Something we need to revisit. And being sometimes in silence is a way to attest to the veracity that we are so equal that people have the right to be who they are, and we don't need to go to war because they want to be. This is Joseph, the father of Jesus, our master. Are you happy to know he was like this? Yes. The Catholic Church already recognized he was above the standards when he was canonized as a saint. For us as Spiritists, we also acknowledge that he was one of the high spirits that came to the earth to open the pathway of a new era on earth. So now, let us be inspired by Joseph, the Father, and lead our lives in the divine silence of God. Okay, friends? Does anybody have any question you want to ask? Yes, Daisy?
So he disincarnated when Jesus was like a young, like teenager boy.
I don't know.
You don't know.
I
Oh,
don't know. Yeah.
because I don't know a lot about his story, but I never hear about him like by the cross or.
No, yeah. I don't
Yeah.
think he was there.
Yeah.
He was older than Mary.
Okay.
He was older than Mary. Yeah. It was in the tradition that they could be somewhat older, really older than the women. So he wasn't there. But even during Jesus' life, we get to know. And that's that's one key element for us to understand Jesus. Because according to the Hebrew traditions, he would have to take, the family things. And that's another lesson for another day, but how Jesus really teaches us that we need to do what we need to do, not necessarily what our family does. Food for thought for another day, okay, friends? So let us appreciate this and prepare ourselves for the passes, so we can also have a meal together in the celebration of the sacredness of being a father. Though today is not yet Father's Day, we're dedicating today in this workshop to all fathers of the earth, including our